The new nanny did something that shocked the Millionaire twins, and the widowed father was speechless. Richard Miller watched from his office window as the young woman climbed the steps of the main entrance. She was the 13th nanny who would attempt to care for his twin boys in less than 2 years. All the previous ones had either quit or been dismissed by the boys themselves, who seemed to have developed a special talent for driving away anyone who tried to get close. On her first day, Emily Wilson walked into the twins' room holding a small hedgehog, and the 8-year-old boys screamed in terror. The noise echoed through the mansion in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, making Richard drop his papers and rush upstairs. When he reached the room, he froze in the doorway, not because of the animal the nanny was holding so carefully, but because that hedgehog looked exactly like the pet his late wife Catherine had secretly kept in the attic. For 2 years since Catherine had passed, Richard had tried to forget all the little secrets she had kept, all the quiet passions he had discovered, only when it was too late to share them. "Get that disgusting thing out of here," shouted Matthew, the more explosive of the twins. "Dad, fire her. She brought a gross animal into our house," added Michael, always following his brother's lead. Emily remained calm, gently stroking the trembling little creature in her hands. Her brown eyes shifted from the boys' frightened faces to their father's shocked expression. "I found him abandoned on the street, Mr. Miller. He was weak and starving. I couldn't just let him die," she said softly but firmly. Richard felt his heart race. Those were the exact words Catherine would have said, the exact words she had said when she brought home the first hedgehog she'd found years ago. The boys had never known about the animals their mother cared for in the attic. It was a secret she had kept to herself. "We want her fired right now," Matthew demanded, crossing his arms. "She can't stay," Michael chimed in. Richard hesitated. Part of him wanted to send Emily away immediately, along with the painful memories she had unknowingly brought back. But another part of him felt a strange curiosity about this impossible coincidence. "I need time to think," Richard murmured, leaving the room without giving a final answer. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Emily carried the hedgehog down to the kitchen, where she found Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper, who had worked in the home for over 20 years. The 65-year-old woman eyed her suspiciously as she prepared dinner. "You have no idea what you've done, girl," Mrs. Thompson said, shaking her head. "Those boys have already gotten rid of 12 nannies. 12? And all for reasons far less serious than bringing an animal into the house." "I understand their reaction," Emily replied, preparing a small bowl of water for the hedgehog. "They must be scared." "Scared?" Mrs. Thompson laughed bitterly. "Those boys aren't scared of anything. They're spoiled, arrogant, and throw tantrums over the smallest things. Ever since their mother died, they've been impossible." Emily stopped stirring the bowl and looked at the housekeeper. What was she like? Their mother? Mrs. Catherine was a special woman. Mrs. Thompson's tone softened. Kind, loving, always worried about others. But she had her quirks. She was always rescuing hurt animals. Mr. Richard never knew the full extent. She kept some secrets. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He paced the house until around 3 in the morning, he heard noises coming from the garden. Through the living room window, he saw Emily in the backyard building a small shelter for the hedgehog, using pieces of wood and materials she had found. He went downstairs and stepped out the back door. "What are you doing?" he asked, startling her. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry if I woke you," Emily said, quickly standing up. "I was just making a little temporary house for Spike." "Spike? That's the name I gave him. Because of his spines, but also because sometimes things that seem hurtful can just be a form of protection." Richard observed her work. It was simple but made with care and attention to detail, exactly like Catherine used to do. "Where did you learn to take care of animals?" he asked. Emily stopped adjusting the wood and looked at him. "I grew up in an orphanage here in Los Angeles. The director always said that caring for something smaller and more fragile than us teaches us to be more human. When I was your kid's age, I was also angry at the world. Taking care of abandoned animals helped me understand that everyone is suffering in some way." Richard felt a tightness in his chest. There was something about this young woman's simplicity that moved him in a way he couldn't explain. The next day, Matthew and Michael came up with their first plan to get rid of Emily. During breakfast, they poured salt into her juice when she stepped away to fetch something from the kitchen. They returned to their seats, pretending innocence. Emily came back and drank the juice without even flinching. The boys waited for her reaction, but she just smiled. "How creative of you. You figured out that salt in orange juice turns it into a homemade energy drink," she said, drinking every last drop. "My teacher at the orphanage taught us that when we were little. Thank you for remembering me." Matthew and Michael exchanged confused glances. That wasn't the reaction they'd expected. For the rest of the day, they ramped up their mischief. They hid her shoes, put glue on the chair where she sat to help them with homework, and made noise in the middle of the night by banging pots. Emily never complained. She borrowed slippers from Mrs. Thompson, cleaned the glue off her clothes without a word, and in the early hours, instead of scolding them, she went down to their room with hot chocolate. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, offering the mugs. "We don't want it," Matthew shouted. "And we don't need you," Michael added. "That's okay," Emily said, leaving the mugs on the nightstand. "I'll leave them here in case you change your mind. Sometimes when I couldn't sleep at the orphanage, hot chocolate helped." She left the room, and the boys stared at the steaming mugs. The smell was delicious, and despite themselves, they ended up drinking it. Mrs. Thompson watched everything with growing suspicion. 20 years of caring for that family gave her the authority to question things, and there was something about Emily's superhuman patience that didn't seem natural. "Mr. Richard, I need to speak with you," she said on the third day. "What is it, Mrs. Thompson?" "That girl isn't normal. No one puts up with the boys for 3 days without at least losing their temper once. She's hiding something." Richard had noticed the same thing. Emily seemed impossibly resistant to his son's teasing. He decided to investigate. That night he went up to the guest room where Emily was staying and heard voices coming from inside. He pressed his ear to the door and realized she was talking to herself, as if studying. "Grieving children may express anger as a form of protection," she murmured. "The loss of a maternal figure can create feelings of abandonment that manifest through destructive behavior." Richard understood. Emily was studying child psychology to better understand his sons. She was preparing herself to truly help them. On the fourth day, Matthew and Michael decided to execute their final scheme. They would pretend to be sick, so Emily would be accused of negligence and fired on the spot. Early in the morning, they began faking fevers and stomach aches. Emily took their temperatures, checked their symptoms, and after a few minutes, she smiled. "You two are very clever," she said. "You've managed to mimic the symptoms perfectly, but I'll call the doctor anyway, just to be sure." When Dr. Johnson arrived, a family physician for years, he quickly confirmed the boys were faking. Matthew and Michael expected Emily to expose them, but she did the opposite. "Doctor, I think I overreacted," she said. "I'm new to this job and might have misread the signs. I'm sorry for making you come all this way for nothing." Dr. Johnson looked surprised, first at Emily, then at the boys, who were gaping. "Don't worry, Emily. Too much caution is better than neglect," the doctor said before leaving. Matthew and Michael didn't understand. Why hadn't she told the truth? Why had she taken the blame for something they'd done? That afternoon, a fierce storm hit Los Angeles. The winds were so strong they knocked down branches in the garden. When Emily went to check on Spike's shelter, she found he was missing. Without hesitation, she rushed out into the rain to search for him. Matthew and Michael watched from their bedroom window as she combed every corner of the garden, drenched in the cold downpour. "Why is she doing this?" Michael asked. "It's just an animal," Matthew muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Emily searched all night. By dawn, she was sitting in the garden, soaked and shivering, still calling for the hedgehog. Mrs. Thompson had seen everything and decided to share something with Richard. "Mr. Richard, I found the girl crying in her room last night," the housekeeper said. "She was looking at an old photo." "What photo?" "I couldn't see it clearly, but it looked like 2 children. Maybe she's lost someone too." Curious, Richard decided to investigate. When Emily left to continue her search, he went up to her room. On the nightstand, he found a faded photo of 2 smiling twin boys. On the back was written, "Emily and David, brothers forever." At that moment, Richard understood everything. Emily had lost a twin brother. That was why she understood Matthew and Michael's pain and anger so deeply. She knew what it was like to lose someone essential. Matthew and Michael, who had secretly followed their father, overheard his conversation with Mrs. Thompson about the photo. They stood frozen at the door, processing the revelation. Emily had a brother who had died. Emily understood how they felt. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. By the end of the fourth day, the twins were exploring the basement when they heard a faint noise behind some old boxes. It was Spike, hurt and frightened, trying to hide. For the first time since their mother had left, Matthew and Michael felt something other than anger. They felt compassion. "Michael, he's hurt," Matthew said, his voice softer. "We need to get Emily," Michael replied. They raced upstairs, calling her name. Emily was in the kitchen, still in her damp clothes from the night before, sipping hot tea Mrs. Thompson had made. "Emily! Emily!" the boys shouted. "What is it?" She stood immediately. "It's Spike! He's in the basement, but he's hurt!" Without hesitation, Emily hurried downstairs with the boys and found the little hedgehog with a swollen paw, likely injured in the storm. "We need to take care of him," she said, carefully picking up the animal. "We'll help," said Matthew. "We want to learn," added Michael. It was the first time the boys had volunteered to do something constructive since their mother had passed away. Emily taught them how to clean the wound, prepare a homemade remedy with herbs, and make a simple bandage. "Caring for something fragile teaches us to be stronger inside," she explained as they worked together. "When we help someone who's suffering, our own pain feels lighter." Matthew and Michael worked in silence, focused on every one of Emily's instructions. For the first time in 2 years, Richard saw his sons showing compassion and teamwork. He watched from the basement door, feeling a hope he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe this young woman really could help his boys heal. Mrs. Thompson, however, felt increasingly threatened by Emily's influence on the family. 20 years of caring for that house had given her a position of trust, and she feared losing her importance. On the morning of the 5th day, while Emily was in the garden with the boys teaching them how to care for Spike, Mrs. Thompson had a dark idea. She took a diamond bracelet belonging to Catherine, which Richard kept in the living room safe, and hid it in Emily's room, planning to accuse her of theft. But Matthew and Michael had developed a new habit, watching Emily constantly. They saw her helping in the kitchen, playing with the hedgehog, reading books about childcare. And they also saw Mrs. Thompson entering her room with something hidden in her hand. "Michael, Mrs. Thompson is up to something," whispered Matthew. "Let's find out what," replied Michael. They followed the housekeeper and saw her placing the bracelet under Emily's pillow. The boys exchanged glances, immediately understanding what was happening. For the first time in 2 years, Matthew and Michael felt the urge to protect someone other than themselves. When Mrs. Thompson discovered the bracelet in Emily's room and called Richard to show the supposed evidence of theft, the twins appeared at the door. "Dad," Mrs. Thompson lied, said Matthew firmly. "We saw her put the bracelet in Emily's room," added Michael. Richard looked surprised at his sons, then at the housekeeper, who had turned pale. "Thompson, is this true?" he asked. The woman tried to deny it, but under the boy's steady gaze and Richard's disappointed expression, she finally confessed. "Mr. Miller, I was only trying to protect this family. That girl came out of nowhere, won the boys over in just days, brought animals into the house. She's going to ruin everything." "Thompson," Richard's voice was heavy with sadness, "you've been part of this family for 20 years. How could you do something like this?" "Because I'm afraid," she burst into tears. "Afraid of not being needed anymore. Afraid of losing my place in the boys' lives, afraid of being alone." Matthew and Michael, who had expected to feel satisfaction at the downfall of the housekeeper who had always spoiled them excessively, felt something different instead. They felt pity. "Dad," said Matthew, "maybe Mrs. Thompson just needs to know she's still important to us." "She took care of us when Mum was gone," added Michael. "She was scared, just like we were." Richard looked at his sons with pride. They were learning compassion and forgiveness. Emily, who had watched everything in silence, approached Mrs. Thompson. "You were the one who held this family together when they needed it most," she said kindly. "I didn't come here to take anyone's place. I came to help, and once they're okay, I'll leave." "But she tried to hurt you," protested Matthew. "Sometimes, when we're afraid, we do things that aren't right," Emily explained. "But that doesn't mean we're bad people. It means we need understanding." Richard decided that Mrs. Thompson wouldn't be fired, but would receive psychological help to deal with her fears and insecurities. It was a solution that showed both justice and compassion. On the 6th day, something extraordinary happened. Matthew and Michael asked to learn more about animal care, and Emily suggested they visit a shelter for abandoned animals in the Silver Lake neighborhood. "We want to teach other kids too," said Matthew. "Just like Emily taught us," added Michael. Richard decided to go with them. The shelter was a simple place, but full of love. There, the boys met children their age from less fortunate families who spent their free time caring for abandoned animals. "Why do you do this?" Matthew asked a 9-year-old boy named Tommy. "Because the animals need someone to take care of them," Tommy replied simply. "And when we care for them, we feel better inside." "Even though you don't get anything in return?" Michael asked. "Oh, we do get something," a girl named Olivia smiled. "We get love." Matthew and Michael spent the afternoon helping feed the animals, clean cages, and play with the dogs. By the time they left, they had given away all the expensive toys they'd brought for the shelter's children. "You didn't have to do that," Emily said on the way back. "We wanted to," Matthew replied. "They need them more than we do. And toys are just for playing, but taking care of animals is more important," Michael added. Richard drove in silence, his eyes brimming with proud tears. His sons were rediscovering compassion. When they got home, they found a letter in the mail. It was addressed to Richard, but the sender was Catherine Miller, a letter she had written years ago, to be delivered only if something specific happened. Richard opened it with trembling hands and read, "My love, if you're reading this, it means someone very special has come into our family's life. I always had a feeling that if something happened to me, the boys would need someone who deeply understood the pain of loss. I left instructions for this letter to be delivered when that person appeared. Trust her, Richard. Trust what your heart is feeling. Sometimes angels appear when we least expect them, disguised as ordinary people carrying wounds like ours. With all my love, Catherine." Richard looked at Emily, who was helping the boys give Spike a bath in the laundry room. "Emily," he called, "I need to talk to you." She came into the living room, drying her hands on a towel. "Yes, Mr. Miller? I want you to tell me about your brother." Emily seemed surprised, but after a moment she sighed and sat down. "David and I were twins. We lived on the streets until we were 6, then went to an orphanage. He was my best friend, my only family. When we turned 15, he left the orphanage to work in construction, saving money so we could stay together when I left too." She paused, wiping away a tear. "There was an accident. David passed away 3 years ago. I was left alone in the world, but I promised him I'd use my pain to help others who were suffering." "And that's how you ended up here?" Richard asked. "Not exactly." Emily smiled through her tears. 5 years ago, when David and I were still at the orphanage, a woman came by. She didn't adopt anyone, but secretly paid for vocational courses for several teens. Thanks to her, I got my childcare training." Richard's heart raced. "Do you know who that woman was?" "Catherine Miller. She told me one day I'd understand why she helped me, and that when the time came, I'd know exactly what to do." Matthew and Michael, who had moved closer to listen, were stunned. "Did Mom know you?" asked Matthew. "Not personally," explained Emily. "But she visited the orphanage regularly and secretly chose some children to help. The director told me she always said she was planting seeds of kindness for the future." "That's why you knew how to care for animals," murmured Michael. "And why you understand our pain," Matthew added. Richard realized Catherine had orchestrated all of this without even knowing exactly how. She had helped Emily years ago, foreseeing that one day her own children would need someone who deeply understood the pain of loss. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On the seventh day, Matthew and Michael woke up with an idea. They wanted to do something special for Emily before the one-week trial period ended. "Dad, can we use Mom's office?" asked Matthew. "What for?" Richard questioned. "We want to plan a surprise," said Michael. Richard had kept Catherine's office exactly as she left it. It was a sacred place in the house, filled with her books, plants, and memories. But seeing his son's determination, he decided to allow it. The boys spent the whole day transforming the office into a small sanctuary for rescued animals. They used the shelves to create little houses, organized Catherine's books on animal care, and set up a special spot in the center for Spike. When Emily saw the result, she was speechless. "We want injured animals to have a special place in our home," explained Matthew. "Just like Mom would have wanted," Michael added. "And we want you to teach us how to care for all of them," they said together. Richard watched the scene with deep emotion. His sons had found a way to honor their mother's memory through acts of kindness. "Emily," he said, "I want to offer you not just a job, but a permanent place in our family. Not as an employee, but as someone who belongs in our lives." Emily looked at Matthew and Michael, who were nodding eagerly, then at Richard. "I accept, but on one condition," she said. "What is it?" "I want to keep donating part of my earnings to the orphanage where I grew up, and I want Matthew and Michael to help me create a project where children from different backgrounds can work together, caring for abandoned animals." "That's perfect," exclaimed Matthew. "We'll teach other kids just like Emily taught us," Michael added. Richard smiled. It was exactly what Catherine would have done. In the following months, the mansion transformed. What was once a cold, silent place became a home full of life, laughter, and purpose. Matthew and Michael organized weekly gatherings where rich and poor children came together to care for rescued animals. Mrs. Thompson, after some therapy, became an enthusiastic supporter of the project, using her cooking skills to prepare special snacks for the young volunteers. Emily never replaced Catherine's memory, but she brought her own kind of love and care to the family. She helped Matthew and Michael understand that the pain of loss could be turned into strength to help others. Spike became the official mascot of the project, and his rescue story inspired dozens of other children to get involved with the cause of abandoned animals. Richard discovered that by opening his heart to Emily, he had found not just a caregiver for his sons, but a partner in the mission of raising better people for the world. One evening, as he watched Emily helping Matthew and Michael care for a litter of orphaned kittens in Catherine's old office, Richard whispered a silent thank you to his late wife. She had planted the right seeds at the right time, and now the whole family was reaping the fruits of her wisdom and love. Matthew and Michael grew up understanding that true luxury wasn't in the things they owned, but in the ability to make a difference in the lives of others. They became responsible and compassionate teenagers, always ready to help those in need. Emily stayed with the family for many years, not just as a nanny, but as a second mother who taught them that true love is the kind that multiplies when shared. And little Spike, who had once arrived hurt and frightened, became the symbol that sometimes the most important things in life come to us in completely unexpected ways, carried by people who enter our lives exactly when we need them most. The Miller mansion was never the same again. It became a place where pain turned into healing, where loss turned into reunion, and where the love of a mother who was gone continued to bloom through the hands of someone who deeply understood the value of a second chance. Richard realized that Catherine hadn't just left a prophetic letter. She had left a legacy of kindness that would keep spreading through generations, one seed after another, one child helped after another, one rescued animal after another. The story of the nanny who brought a hedgehog and changed everything became legendary in the neighborhood, inspiring other families to open their hearts to the possibility that sometimes angels really do appear when we least expect them, disguised as ordinary people carrying wounds similar to ours, ready to turn pain into healing and loneliness into family. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of transformation and healing. Do you believe Emily made the right choices by not giving up on the boys? Share your honest opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories that touch the soul.